Welcome this evening. I'm Ginger Ostro. I'm the Executive Director of Advance Illinois, and we're so excited to have all of you here tonight. We have a terrific program set up for you, but before we do, I want to do a couple of acknowledgments. I'd like to thank our Legislative Host Committee, Senators Bertino Tarrant, Lightford, Menard, Senator McGuire, and Senator Weaver, Representative Crespo, Representative Davis, Representative Moeller, and Representative Pritchard. Thank you all for being on the Host Committee. Additionally, I'd like to welcome Susie Morrison, a member of the State Board of Education. She is here in the room with us, so thank you for being here. And we also have many staff from the State Board of Ed here as well, and a number of other state agency directors. Can I just ask current and former state agency directors to go ahead and stand so we can acknowledge you, please? Thank you so much for being here. And then we have two Advance Illinois board members here tonight, Harry Berman and Reverend Copeland, who you will be hearing from in just a moment. So welcome and thank you so much for all of your support for us over the years. And we welcome all of you, community leaders, teachers, professors, administrators, and others, community members who are here as part of the education system. We also thank the 26 co-hosts who made this event possible this evening. You've seen their names on the screen here as you've walked in, and there's a short description of each of those organizations that was on your chair. There was a brief packet, and you can see the names and what those organizations are. It's really important that we have such a collective effort here to make that happen. Each year at the Legislator Forum, this is our 7th Legislator Forum, we pick a topic that we think is both important and timely. Last year, we came on the eve of the State Board of Education's approval of the state's Every Student Succeeds Act plan. This year, all of us in the state are poised to implement that plan, what it means for a new system for evaluating and supporting schools to ensure that our students are prepared to achieve success in college, career, and life. So we picked the theme tonight, School Improvement from the Ground Up. Why that theme? We chose it because with ESSA, we have a tremendous opportunity to ensure that all of our schools can achieve excellence. But we also recognize the power of communities coming together to make that happen. So tonight, we explore the idea of how we prepare students for future success with strong schools and strong connections to community and to business partners. So just like the State Board of Education says, the whole child, the whole school, and the whole community. So just a little bit of background. 5 years ago, Advance Illinois came together with the Education Systems Center at Northern Illinois University and the Illinois Student Assistance Commission to found the 60 by 25 network to support communities already working together to achieve the state's 60 by 25 goal, that 60% of adults will have some kind of high-quality post-secondary degree or credential by the year 2025, and to help encourage other communities to take on that challenge and to work together. Today, there are 14 leadership communities working in partnership and committed to educational outcomes in their community. They work on efforts throughout the P20 spectrum, from early childhood education to college and career pathways and beyond. The newest communities, welcome, Sangamon County is here with us today, so congratulations on becoming a leadership community. You will hear more about what this means as we have another leadership community here, one of the first, Rockford, in Alignment Rockford, and they will talk about the work so that you can get a sense of how powerful this can be. For many of the other communities that are part of the network, we work with them on data, and their data is highlighted in the posters in the back of the room. So I hope you had a chance to spend some time looking at the issues that they're taking on and how important the data is to really telling their story and to help address the issues that they're focused on. In addition to having them here, we had an opportunity to be in the Capitol today sharing the data with folks that were in the Capitol. So in addition to highlighting what the 60 by 25 network and community work does, we also want to explore the question today in this context of ESSA is how can a robust community partnership be part of the support system under ESSA? What's required when we identify schools as needing supports? Are there any lessons that we can learn? So we really want to help people understand the work in the communities and think about how it ties together with what the state's implementing under the Every Student Succeeds Act. So let me turn to our keynote speaker to help us understand the power of what we're talking about. Her full bio is on the back of the program that you have at your table, as it is for everybody, so I won't go through all of it, but just to tell you a little bit about Dr. Nancy Zimpher. As Chancellor of the State University of New York, the nation's largest comprehensive system of public higher education, Dr. Zimpher drove regional and local economic development. Her work has involved the creation of seamless cradle-to-career education pipelines in several communities. Dr. Zimpher has also served as president of the University of Cincinnati, chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and executive dean of the professional colleges and dean of the College of Education at The Ohio State University. And she's really been an inspiration to us. So we're thrilled to have her with us, so I welcome Dr. Zimpher to the podium here.
For your leadership of Advance Illinois. Okay, so I'm thrilled to be back again with Advance Illinois. I did my homework. I was trying to read everything I could about 60 by 25. I also work with a couple of sites that are part of what's called the Strive Together network, which is a cradle-to-career network that started in Cincinnati, which was where I served at the University of Cincinnati. So I have sort of a story to tell, and I needed to tell it kind of starting where I am living and working in New York. And I thought you would enjoy the fact that there's a word up there that is largely unknown called systemness, which is actually on Wikipedia. Now, I don't know what you think about Wikipedia, but I was giving, when I was chancellor at SUNY, a State of the State address, State of the University address. I always called it the State of the State. Of course, that was wrong. And it wasn't standing room only, but every year I would toddle up to the microphone and try to tell people what we were doing at the State University of New York. And I think I had been saying a lot about the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I had a lot of students working with me, and one of them invented the word systemness, and somebody in the audience put it on Wikipedia, and so we said, well, what the heck, we will, I'm sure Webster would approve of this. And I guess you could understand why I was so blown away with systemness. This is where I started teaching. This is a one-room school in the foothills of the Ozarks, and when I left, they closed all the one-room schools. Well, I must have done something wrong, but can you imagine a girl from Southern Ohio, well, a county fair queen, actually. My mother overheard this woman say the ugliest one always gets it. So that was training for being university president, by the way. So these are the 64 these are the 64 campuses of the State University system, and I actually came in on June 1, and they always ask new presidents, so what are you going to do first? And I said naively, I'm going to visit the campuses. At the University of Cincinnati, this is a golf cart and 2 days. I left home on June the 2nd, starting with Cornell. Did you know that was part of the State University of New York? And I traveled to the 64 campuses. I came home Labor Day. But it was the best thing I could ever have done because it showed me the power of the economic engine that is our university systems. In most of the communities, the university is the largest employer. They drive economic development. They work with business and industry. So this systemness thing was my first experience with trying to work well together at the higher education level. So I did what many would do in a new situation like that. I held conferences and discussions and had lots of stakeholders at the table until we reached a decision of how we could be the economic recovery engine for New York. I came in 2008. I was so busy, I didn't know we were having a recession. But it turns out we were, and universities had to play a role in that recovery. So we thought we needed to play a role in healthcare and in energy and in global affairs. And most importantly, and I say it is my personal favorite, in what we were calling the education pipeline. I will tell you unequivocally, that word was not being used. Nobody really thought about education all the way back to birth or prenatal care, which is a lot more fashionable these days than then, and didn't think about seeing life on that kind of continuum. So I made no bones as chancellor that the education pipeline was a pretty big thing with me, and we were going to use our ability to incentivize collective behavior around that cradle-to-career pipeline to move the dial in education for New York. And somewhere along the line, to the Reverend, where are you, Kenneth? This is my scripture. I just want to say I carry this quote from David Leonhardt everywhere I go. Education, educating more people, is simply the best bet any society can make. And you know the routine. It solves healthcare issues, it gives people a livelihood, their children are healthier, their children are educated, they're better citizens, they vote more often. It's just unequivocal. The people who say we don't need more education just don't get it. I don't know what else to say. So we turned this educating more people into remembering that access is our first opportunity. And frankly, for many, we got stuck on access. We forgot to think about completion. So let everybody in, but don't worry about whether they get out. That is not going to work in our economy. And then success is, Mr. Workforce Development, success is a career, a job, a livelihood. So this became the standard for that great big university system. So if completion is really the composite of access and completion and career success, how are we as a country doing? Well, this completion puzzle does not speak too well for our progress. Yes, we've landed on a 6-year graduation rate from college at about 60%. And I think, by the way, I even hesitate to use the community college data because we really don't know how many community college students are successful. 40% of the State University of New York graduates from our baccalaureate institutions started at a community college. So how can we say that 13% or 22% or 28% when we don't even know how to track the success of our community colleges? The whole point of this is we're not doing all that well. And if you disaggregate the data and you look at who's completing and who's achieving, we're not doing that well there either. And by the way, I will say a number of times, disaggregating the data is absolutely necessary. We can't tell how we're doing. We can't close the achievement gaps if we're not disaggregating the data. But something else I do live with, and I said to Pat I might say this, so I'm going to say it. We have a big divide here about who's at fault when an institution like SUNY offers remediation for over 40% of the students who come to us. And we're pretty big on saying, if you're K-12, are you? If you would send us better students, we would do a better job. But turns out we prepare the teachers who teach the students who come to college ready or not. And with a bodyguard, I have said that many times to my higher ed colleagues. So you remember in about 2008, this was something Lumina was interested in. This was something, Jim, that Gates was interested in. It was something you encouraged other philanthropic organizations to get involved in. We began to set these targets. It's a little confusing because if the 6-year baccalaureate graduation rate is about 60%, and then the foundations are talking about 60% of the adults having some post-secondary experience and completion. And then this guy, you know, it's really funny what I'm doing with this. That guy wanted a 65% goal as well. It really doesn't matter whether it's 60% of the adults in your state or 60% of the students going to college or 60% of underfunded and impoverished students. All these people, all these networks, and of course, Advance Illinois, and all the networks that are here, of which there are many, and I met some of you tonight, began to pick up the gauntlet on completion. And you remember George Bush, number 41, talked about 1,000 points of light? We have to congratulate him. We have created 10,000 points of light. We have created a lot of initiatives, many of whom, by the way, I've counted 12 of these groups that SUNY belonged to. So we were joining improvement networks that are listed up here, and this is only about half or less of the ones that are really in business trying to move that dial. So to Lumina's credit, Jim, took a real hard look at our progress, and from 2008 to initially 2014, 15, at that point we had moved the dial 2%. Now, rightly so, Lumina began to count credentials. I think that's fair enough. I think that answers the argument that college is not for everybody, because credentials, somebody said to me once, if you leave college with some student debt and you don't get that degree, that's like having a mortgage without a house. You have nothing to put on the wall. This is not going to move the economy if we don't find ways to credential prior learning experience, work experience, and then the traditional degrees of 2-year and 4-year institutions. Once you throw in credentials in the count, we've moved the dial since 2008, 10 years ago, 8 percentage points. Nothing to write home about. And the projection, again, with an organization with great credibility, even though we're projecting a 2020 target, it might be reached by 2037. I love this. If you had a 2025 goal, because Lumina had one deadline and the president had another deadline and other institutions, you would realize your goal in 2054. In other words, we need to speed up the work. We need to face the reality that we're not getting it done, and no matter how you cut it, if 60% is our goal, which I think is laudable, 40% are not reaching that goal. So the real message is that we have to get better. We just simply have to get better, and it's not about the target, it's about learning how to get better. So in this confusing milieu, there are solutions and systems, or cobbled together systems, or wobbly systems, are a big part of the answer. And I have to say, I don't really think we have a system of education in America. I think we have multiple systems. And when you look at the way regulations work at the federal level, ESSA is a K-12, K-12 benchmark. That's not where higher ed gets regulated. We get regulated in the Higher Education Act, which I think is, what, Jim, 8 years and it still hasn't passed? And early childhood is regulated in about 4 different agencies, in HHS, in labor, in defense. Is there any wonder that we don't think system at the federal level or at the state level? Well, okay, here's another. This isn't quite my text, Reverend, but it was pretty powerful when The World is Flat came out, and this guy said, you know what, if only we could get our act together in post-secondary as well as in our intellectual and innovative practices, nobody could touch us. But we're pretty siloed. We're pretty independent. We don't like to play well in the sandbox. We want to do it our way, and we have got to get over that. So my illustration is a personal one. When I arrived at the University of Cincinnati, in, oh, by the way, Cincinnati, so they kind of named themselves after their cities. This was the data. Now, this is New York data because I could get the most update. We don't think about high school graduation earlier than, say, juniors to seniors, because I don't know how else we would have an 85% graduation rate in this country if we started counting from 9th grade. Because 9th graders are going to drop out before they even get to the high school diploma, about 25% of them. And before they get from that high school commencement to the first day of classes, 51 of those 100 ninth graders are still standing. And we spend a lot of time thinking about freshman to sophomore retention, 38. The bottom line, when I arrived in Cincinnati, and today in New York, 1 in 5 of those ninth graders will make it through a 6-year baccalaureate completion experience. 1 in 5. And you can bet when you disaggregate the data, we can figure out where they live. Oh my God, what are we going to do? This is the most fabulous cartoon. It's from Albuquerque, the Albuquerque Journal, because Albuquerque has a Cradle to Career partnership, and it started just like this. If you would send us better students, we would do a better job. And you know, in the days of No Child Left Behind, the only people in the barrel were PK-12. We weren't in the barrel, higher ed. Social agencies weren't in the barrel. One irresponsible entity was taking all the heat. And Race to the Top got a little better, and I believe if we'd had more time, we actually had President Obama talking about the pipeline. He actually, it's like Groucho Marx, who's as old as I am, and the duck comes down. I mean, it's the pipeline, stupid. We have got to get our act together, and we have to start earlier. I do often accuse my colleagues in higher education of starting at grade 13. Starting at grade 13, you got a lot of remediation, you got a lot of trouble. We, in Ohio, when they got mad about remediation in the legislature, they said, we are paying twice, and that's not going to work. So in Cincinnati, this was us, and we couldn't quite figure out how to get our act together. So we sent some academics and some students to a pub. What doesn't happen in a pub? I go around looking for these napkins that have drawings on them because there could be something really valuable there. This turned out to be a pretty famous roadmap for what we need to do. Get kids ready for kindergarten, reading at 3rd grade level, doing their math at 8th grade level, graduating high school, getting into college, staying into college, getting a degree, and joining the workforce. And in every case, there had to be a metric. I know we've talked a little bit, John, about measuring and testing, and I'm not going there. But I will say to you, if we don't have a metric, we're never going to know. We are never going to know. In Cincinnati, in northern Kentucky, every school district had a different instrument for kindergarten readiness, but at least they had one. So we didn't try to aggregate it. We let you have your measure that worked for your school district or whatever, the measure that worked for your university, and we went from there to this, and that's why I didn't want to give up on that first slide. I know everybody on that slide, and I will tell you, it probably mimics the 60 by 25, the Strive Together initiatives that are in Chicago and Oak Park, because you've got to have everybody. There were a lot of universities there. There were superintendents there. There were union leaders. There were business community leaders, mayors. I am there, but that guy got in front of me. And I was one of the co-founders. When I look at this picture, I just want to say, arrow, she's there, she's there. But you see what? You have to turn over ownership. You can't say, I was there. You have to say, we were there. And this, folks, is 10 years ago. Go slow to go fast. 10 years ago. All we knew is that we needed that roadmap. We needed to get those kids through that pipeline, and we had no idea what to do next. Now, over time, we figured out what to do, and the only reason I wanted to put this up is a couple of dudes who wrote in the Stanford Innovation Review in 2011 started touring the country looking for communities that had moved the dial. They found a group in Virginia that was cleaning up a river. They found a group in Massachusetts that was lowering obesity. They didn't include this one, but there were rave reviews about Milwaukee lowering teenage pregnancies. And of course, they found Strive Together, that little pipeline up there. And they stayed with us a long time. until they wrote up what they found across the country in a highly reputable journal with Stanford in its title, and they decided that what we have here is collective impact. So out goes systemness. It is still on the Wikipedia, but I didn't write it up in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, so now we're talking collective impact. But you know what? It's fine. I only want to caution you that there are a lot of imposters out there. I also say about my colleagues, when they ask you as a university president, are you doing blah, 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 you go, oh yeah, we do that. Oh yeah, we've done that. We always do that. And I've taken to saying, no, you aren't. Because collective impact takes so much sweat equity and depersonalization and humility that the way they describe it is pretty impressive to me. And actually in Cincinnati and in these Strive Together networks across the country, of which there are about 70, the arrows are moving up. And you know what sold the day for us? We quit talking about achievement and assessment and benchmarks, and we talk about trending positive. Can you see the dial moving? Trending positive, and we reward trending positive. Our proof points in Strive Together, which is what Cincinnati became when it went global after that collective impact article, we are happy if the indicators below the goal of kindergarten readiness are trending positive. So I could show you 100 of these, but this is Portland moving the FAFSA completion dial. Will you tell me why we can't get the FAFSA form completed? I mean, I know it's hard, but a lot of things are hard. This is summer melt. This is 50% of the kids that say they're going to go to college in June and don't arrive there in September. Fancy intellectual academic term called summer melt. But you know what? We ought to be able to fix that. And what this article, this Stanford article said about collective impact is that it essentially has 4 ingredients. And instead of this boring pillar thing, one of the key ingredients of collective impact is the table. You have got to figure out who has enough leadership gizmo to get the right people at the table. And I will tell you, the first time we went shopping for the superintendents in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, they said no. Because you know what they heard? We're the university and we're here to help you and we're not coming to your table and we are under the gun and we're in No Child Left Behind and no, 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 no. So we started meeting without them, and you know what they said about 6 months later? You can't do this without us. I go, all right. Now the business community was a little slower than that because they wanted to build a KIPP school. Okay, build a KIPP school. I love KIPP. But there are 20,000 kids over here, and they can't fit into one high school. So get with it. And it took a while, but they got with it. You do have to have a shared goal. Now, I don't know who these people are, but the people that put my PowerPoints together think this is really funny when I get stuck. And so then I did learn that it's justice for all. So if it's completion for all, and it's a living and a family and a lifestyle and a job, then it's a goal for all of us. And this is not cheating. This is sharing data publicly. Our sites have got to publish an annual report card with every indicator under those goals right on that paper with disaggregated data. So I want to say a little bit more about sharing data. These charts in the back of the room, they are very powerful. They have data on them. A believer in collective impact is someone who starts every meeting with data. Now, what we like to do is rumor, innuendo, finger pointing. Why don't you just show the data and say, are you satisfied with the data? Is this what you want to be and do? And I'll tell you what, the 4th pillar. So we have forming a table, having common goals with evidence-based actions, sustaining over time, go slow to go fast. The philanthropic community is a little bit part of the problem. I went to this cocktail party in Pittsburgh, and they were doing mentoring, blah, 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 blah. And I think we should do this in Cincinnati. Okay. Do you have any evidence that this is working for you? It's just an idea. My favorite one is the backpack, which you fill on Friday, and they come back on Monday, and they're going to be a better reader. I go, okay. I understand the seriousness of it. We're talking about hunger. I know that. I'm not poking fun at that problem. I'm just saying, if you just throw stuff at it, spray and pray, it is not going to sustain itself. And if you don't know how it's working, how are you going to know that you need to keep doing it? What is that thing? If you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get the results you always got, and we're not going to move the dial. So my real point here is that the most important point of convening a community table, setting common goals and indicators, collecting data fearlessly, regularly, transparent to all, is that that may be the greatest key of all. So I only want to say to you, if you want to know how in the world are we going to get all this done, I have become, and I'm actually in training for this, I have become the world's largest advocate for what's called improvement science, continuous improvement. In Cincinnati, when we started our little cabal, we actually took training from GE and Toyota. We had black belts, and you know what? There are a lot of people out there in the world doing this work, and once again, I've done that. Baldrige is 40 years old. When I was in Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin Stout won the first ever Baldrige Education Award. Nobody lifted a finger. You know why? Stout's a technical school. It's a practice school. It's a skills-based school. It isn't Madison. Who cares? You see, we didn't think we needed it. We just, unlike K-12, whom I think is pretty darn good at improvement science, and you could say the same for Six Sigma. It's just the scientific method. You just ask questions, and then you collect the data, and then you figure out what went wrong. What went wrong with me? This group is something to watch. This is the Institute of Health Improvement, and every hospital in your community knows what this work is. And 30 years ago, Robert Wood Johnson started investing in hospital improvement, and you know what? Why is there so much infection in a hospital? They don't wash their hands. Well, see, we need you. We need you. Carnegie is all over this, and I don't know if I saw you there, Jim, but I was at Carnegie. I was sitting in a classroom with 150 teachers and one university professor, because I know we need it. I know we have got to use this science to get more students to completion. Annie E. Casey gets it. Bill Gates gets it. Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda, I think I might have met them once. They had a propensity to give us, someone said, the solution in search of a problem. Like, here's the answer. I mean, why not? But now, $1.7 billion only given to schools that believe improvement science is the way to get where we've got to go. So I want to write Bill and Melinda a letter and say, you know who needs this more than as much as side by side with K-12? Universities. Because we train the teachers who teach the students who come to college ready or not. So we don't know whether we're doing a good enough job. And this idea of trending positive and looking at the data every time you make a decision in a cycle of do and plan and study and act again, what they, I think, the Carnegie people call this rapid prototyping, that's going to move the dial. So, that said, I think you're in a terrific position to do this. I'm loving 60 by 25. I can't wait to hear what you're doing at Rockford. And I tell you, in the go slow to go fast, this notion of a pipeline, this notion of community ownership of the data and the outcomes is really what I think will ultimately move the dial. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, we have a scene change here. I will just do some quick introductions. Again, your full bios are on the back of your program. Thank you, Dr. Zimpher. That was fabulous. And I think we'll now get to see how that all applies here in Illinois. So let me start by introducing Dr. K. Edward Copeland, who is pastor of the New Zion Baptist Church in Rockford and the former governing board chairman of Alignment Rockford. He also serves on the board of Advance Illinois. Dr. Jarrett, Ehren Jarrett, has been superintendent of Rockford Public Schools since 2013. He's a member of the Alignment Rockford Governing Board and the Board of Directors for the Rockford Area Economic Development Council. Anisha Grimmett became executive director of Alignment Rockford in 2017. She previously worked for 20 years in various engineering and leadership roles with the UTC Aerospace Systems. She's a graduate of Auburn High School in Rockford. So I'm going to just ask some questions. First, we're going to explain Alignment Rockford and what they do, talk about some of the progress they've made, and then ask people to think about how this might apply in this new world of ESSA that we have. So let me start with Reverend Copeland. You were there at the beginning, founding of Alignment Rockford. What led to its creation and focus on education? And who is Alignment Rockford? And tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so Alignment Rockford started in 2009 after a group of individuals in our community, some of the usual suspects that were concerned about education. We had just finished an initiative to try to get charter schools in Rockford, but we realized charter schools were not a panacea. It was just something that we thought would add to the portfolio, but we recognized that part of our problem was that we had a systemic problem. There was something wrong with the system. So we commissioned a lady named Lori Priest, who became our first executive director, to do an environmental scan across the country to see who was actually dealing with systemic transformation, because we recognized that we could either keep on polishing up flat tires, or we could get some brand new tires that had some tread on them, see if we can move forward. She came across Alignment Nashville that had been collecting business leaders, civic organizations, higher educational institutions to get behind the public school and to do solution design. We bugged and stalked Alignment Nashville until they adopted us, and we became the second community to adopt their model, which basically is, to Dr. Zimpher's point, a solution design model that takes the human capital in a community, leverages it to get behind the public schools in a way that is nonpartisan, in a way that we stay out of the way and we let the experts tell us what the problem is that needs to be solved, and then we use a disciplined process to come up with a solution, model it, if it works, scale it up, and then find a way to institutionalize it so that it becomes part and parcel of the district's model moving forward. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's great, thank you. Superintendent Jarrett, can you pick up the story from here? How has your work as part of Alignment Rockford led to changes in Rockford Public Schools? Sorry, we have to share a microphone.
The change has been transformational. Just to give you a perspective of where we started, I came in about 2 years later. I'd lived in the community but worked in another district, so I arrived on the scene in 2011, and we got our annual survey results from the Rockford Area Economic Development Council, and our favorability rating came in at 3% approval in the region from the business community when they were surveyed, and I thought, boy, that is bad. And then I looked into the data, and I realized we are in the Economic Development Council, and I think we voted for ourselves. So I think we were literally actually at zero. So the relationship between the community, the business community, the students we served was incredibly fractured. So I don't think we can underestimate the power of the work that Dr. Copeland and some of the folks that came together around this. They weren't starting charter schools in Rockford just because they thought it was a nice idea. It was an act of desperation at that point. They didn't feel like the school community was listening to the business community or to our families and parents. We were so disconnected. And it was really inspiring to come into that situation and to start the work. And it's been slow, tough, painstaking work. But what's happened, the biggest success, and I can talk about a lot of academic successes and specific programs we've done, but I think the biggest thing that started to happen is that as the community has come together to support our schools, everyone feels differently about the work. We are celebrating those incremental wins that referred to in the previous presentation. Our most recent data from 2 years ago, we were up to 35% support from the business community. Now, normally I wouldn't be on a panel bragging about 35% support, but when it was 0, that gives you a sense of how far things have come. Our graduation rates are nowhere near where we want them to be, but they're up substantially. The opportunities that students and parents receive, we passed 2 referendums to improve our facilities, but ultimately what happened is, instead of everybody lining up to blame each other for why the schools were so terrible, everyone rolled up their sleeves and said, what can we do to turn this thing around together? And so I was the recipient as a new superintendent, but having deep roots in the community and the beneficiary of the work of Alignment Rockford. I think they were a key catalyst and continue to be a key catalyst in all of the work that we're doing to transform education. What got interesting was one of the first experiences I had with Alignment Rockford, being the brilliant superintendent that I was to try to tell them not to do the most important initiative that we did. I thought it was a bad idea. We were going to redesign our high schools, and I was the educational expert, and I went to the person who funded Alignment Rockford and said, you have to kill this thing. They're trying to tell us to redesign our high schools, and I don't think we're ready to do that. And the power of the process really worked. We really worked together to work through some of those initial anxiety and challenges. I went to Nashville and had a chance to see some things they did. And when we redesigned our high schools, it brought our community together in a really, really substantial and meaningful way. And I give so much credit to the business community and to our larger community that supported the work.
So just take a minute and explain how you redesigned the high school, just so folks have some more context.
We had very traditional high schools that were organized in a very traditional 9th through 12th grade way. We worked with Ford Motor Company, and we are now the third, we were the third model community now in the country. That was 2 years ago, received that designation. And basically what we've done with our high schools is we have a freshman academy and then 4 different wall-to-wall academies that are the same in all 4 of our high schools. And all of our students, what's different about a Rockford educational experience primarily is that our students enter into a smaller learning community around their area of interest, and they choose a 3-year pathway of courses that instead of just taking only exploratory electives, they take a 3-year sequence of electives in addition to exploratory electives that culminate with college credit and or a career certification. And here's the bottom line. What was powerful is you can't do that work without a backbone agency like Alignment Rockford, because what we immediately encountered is if we want to have all of our students having internship experiences, having the chance to have this massive Academy Expo, we went from having about 2,000 community volunteers in our school to 10,000 over a 7-year period. We're nearly $2 million in a community our size of volunteer work, and that's the engine that it takes to fuel a redesigned high school system. If all you're doing is just reshuffling where the teachers teach, you're not going to change anything. What high school redesign has really been about is inviting our teachers in to the business community to learn about that work, and it's also been about getting our students and our teachers out into the business community as well and strengthening that partnership. So love to talk more about it, but I know we have a lot of other topics to get to.
That's great, thank you. Anisha, you bring a lot of different perspectives to the work. So let's just start first. You know, you've been a successful graduate of the Rockford Public Schools, a business leader, and now executive director of Alignment Rockford. Why is the work of Alignment Rockford important to you, just from a personal perspective?
Yeah, I have this. It reminds me of Bob Barker. So personally, the reason why the work of Alignment is near and dear to my heart because I am part of that Alignment story. Not that alignment was around when I graduated from high school. I'm a lot older than that. But I am the result of when a community, business community, partners with a non-for-profit that partners with the public school system, what can happen. I graduated from Auburn High School in 1995. I didn't really know what I really wanted to do of leaving high school. People told me, hey, I think you should go into engineering because you like to take things apart. You know, I love how to solve problems. I hated math, so that was part of a problem. And I felt that engineers walked around with pocket protectors, and that was not me, right? And so I was just kind of like, I don't think that's a good fit for me. And so I went ahead and still applied to go to school to be part of an engineering program. And I received a scholarship from a local nonprofit, Rockford Area Minority Management. And they had a partnership with Sunstrand, which is an aerospace company. At the time, they're now known as UTC Aerospace Systems. And it was anyone who was going into engineering got a chance to have an internship at Sunstrand. So right out of high school, first day of summer, I was in Sunstrand working on their manufacturing plant, a floor. And that's when I realized that engineering could be amazing and that it was a great fit for me. I never left until I joined Alignment Rockford last year in October 2017. The relationships that I developed, the exposure that I received to different careers just within engineering alone. I've had various roles within that company. We've gone through 3 different names since then, but my last role was in human resources and talent development. And I really realized then is that the need for our company at the time to get back involved in the community and to help the public school systems develop our future pipeline, our future talent. So I am I say a success story of when that happens, because if that opportunity was not available for me, maybe I wouldn't be here today. I definitely probably wouldn't have chosen engineering as a career, and we know that exposure is key. Kids don't know what they don't know, right? So it's up to us to expose them to those experiences and to help guide them along the way. So I didn't know, and I'm glad I got that opportunity to know.
And do you want to just say more, as in your role in the business community as head of HR talent, what you were seeing and why bringing your company as part of Alignment Rockford was so important?
So in that talent development area, we were seeing that we were getting entry-level employees into our business that weren't up to some of the standards that we were expecting. More so maybe in the as far as having experiences, and then as well as the soft skills. We had to incorporate a lot of training programs for the entry-level employees just on appropriate etiquette within a corporate culture, which things to our surprise, we felt they should have learned either in college or in high school, right? And so we saw that they were lacking, a lot of other skills as well that we were needing. Also, recruiting to Rockford can be tough. We're competing with Chicago, Milwaukee, those other bigger cities within the Midwest. And so we found that we would go out and recruit across the country for new and diverse talent, but it was hard to retain them because of the size of the community and what people were really truly looking for in the area. And so, like I said, I never left, and I'm not the only person that grew up in Sunstrand and in UTC Aerospace Systems that are from Rockford. And so we were looking into the strategy of, kind of helping to develop that talent and reaching back into our own community to hire. And so that was part of that aspect and strategy as well.
Great. Nancy, before I come back to you, let me just ask Reverend Copeland, Ehren, what do you think is the biggest success so far of Alignment Rockford?
three things from my perspective. One is the tone and tenor of our conversation about education in the community has changed. It used to be so raucous that we couldn't get anything done because everybody was pointing fingers, everybody was blaming somebody else, but through a disciplined process and through the strategies and the tactics that we have used. Plus, when we started, we had a public meeting where we had a big board that listed the principles we were going to operate by, and we made everybody sign it. And we keep that board every meeting we have, so when anybody tries to get out of line, we can say, you know, you signed this, and this is how we're going to operate. And we do have to check people sometimes. Our mantra is check your guns at the door, and when you come in this setting, we're about supporting the strategic plan of the public school system. So it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, I'm independent, doesn't matter if you're Baptist, Presbyterian, we don't care anything about that. Here's what we're getting ready to do, here's how we're going to do it. So the biggest success from my perspective has been to change the conversation. So it's no longer acceptable in our community to point fingers at somebody. You have to lock arms with somebody. Secondly, I think we've leveraged limited resources because part of the reason, I didn't say this, but let me say it now, part of the reason we started Alignment Rockford is because we knew Superman wasn't going to come to save us. If we're going to save ourselves, we better use what we have right here and figure out how to make some gumbo out of it. For those of you who are not familiar with gumbo, gumbo started when somebody didn't have enough of one thing, so they took everything they did have and made a delicious delicacy out of it. So that's been our success, leveraging limited resources to get maximum impact without looking for outside saviors.
The one thing I would add is we've started to make progress in a lot of different academic indicators. Graduation rate is improving, our attendance rate, our student discipline, our ECT, now SAT scores of advanced placement participation. Those are all modestly improving. I agree that the tenor is huge. But one of the things that I think we're really starting to address, and Anisha referred to it and so did Dr. Copeland, and that's this idea of we live in a community where we really face an existential threat, that our best and brightest are going to be leaving us for greener pastures, and our best and brightest companies are going to be leaving us for greener pastures. So we either have to find a way to marry those two assets and really create an unbreakable bond, or we will lose the talent game, and we will lose the jobs game, and we will ultimately die a slow, painful Midwestern death in Rockford, Illinois. And I want to have no part of that. So one of the things we've been able to do through this model, only with the support of the business community and all of our families working together, is we've started to build a 4-step model for connecting students with, and our talented students with a reason to stay home with our really, really talented companies that provide employment. So we are the second largest employer in the region as the school system. So we decided to eat our own cooking. And we created something to create teachers. Many of you know we face a very, very significant teacher shortage, but we also are in a community where we are about a third white, a third Hispanic, and a third African American, and yet our teacher population looks nothing like that. It's mostly female and it's mostly Caucasian. We could go all around the country trying to out-recruit people, but if you look at statistics across the country, that's who goes into teaching pretty much everywhere across the country. And we were not winning those recruiting battles because people find out what the temperature is in January in Rockford, Illinois, or in April, and we just didn't win many of those battles. So what we did is we took our recruiting budget and we partnered with Rockford University, and we create a very unique partnership. And I'm really proud of this work, not only because of how it's going to impact RPS in our own talent pool, but it's going to be a model for other areas as well. But what we do is we take our 6th, 7th, 8th grade students, 9th grade students, and get as many of them as we can excited about education. And then they get into one of those 3-year sequence of courses called a pathway, and they take a 10th, 11th, and 12th grade course. And by the time they're done with high school, we've had a couple hundred students go through that sequence, and they culminate with a dual credit course at Rockford University in Ed Psych, and they get some basic experiences around kids. And then what happens is, if out of that group, Rockford University, which costs $31,000 a year, discounts their tuition for our students down to $5,000 a year. So we give them a $100,000 scholarship, and we have 20 students per year that do that. How do we pay for that? We don't. What we do is we guarantee Rockford University that every year we're going to run a master's in urban education for our employees, which we can totally legally do. And so what we end up doing is each year we have 20 students go through that, and we have our second cohort. We're really proud of it. We have 20. 50% of that cohort is Latino. We still have a lot of work to do with African American and getting the male ratio where we want. But we think if we want to have a teaching force that reflects the quality, talent, and diversity of our community, let's recruit in our own community. They're right there. But we have to recruit them. We can't wait till they're seniors in high school. So what this model allows us to do is then hire those students, pay for their master's degree. So our proposition is stay in Rockford and you have a $150,000 scholarship. Now the power of this is not just what we're going to do for teachers, which is huge, but we're going to do this for engineers. We're going to do this for police officers. We're going to do this for whatever the top needs are in our community. That's how we're going to do the work. Our goal is to have 14 of these pathways in place. And that is the power of alignment, because other than the teacher pathway, which we wanted to have in place as a model, we can't do any of this work without our partners. We need a higher ed partner. We need a business community partner. We just happen to play multiple roles in this particular equation, but we are really excited about that as an early win with this work.
So what's next, Anisha? What is the next thing that you're taking on as your role in Alignment Rockford?
So Alignment Rockford, we primarily focus on the bookends of education. So we focus on early childhood, from birth to third grade, and then the high schools, which Dr. Jarrett has kind of talked about that. And so in the high school framework, we're working on a work-based learning continuum to help ensure that all of our high school students have some type of career awareness or career learning experience at each grade level. And so that takes a lot of partnerships within the local community in order to make that happen. All of our ninth graders will be receiving, or actually they're already receiving, the Academy Expo, which is a career exploration. Last year in 2017, on my third day, we had the Academy Expo where we had all of the freshmen attending this huge event with over 100 business partners, had booths set up, kind of talking about their careers, and had hands-on activities for all of the kids. It was all divided by their academies as well, and it was great. It was a great time. I was excited. I think I may have found my third career. But it was just exciting to see the business community as a whole come together and be excited about sharing what they do at work, and how kids can kind of relate to what they're doing in the classrooms to what they'll be doing in the real world. So, of course, the kids were allowed to ask questions, things like, how much do you make? Because that's always important. But it was just a great interaction between the business community and the kids. Sophomore year, all students will receive sophomore site visits. So it allows a group of students to go to a business site to kind of see what the workplace looks like, right? So if you're interested in manufacturing, engineering, say you take a trip to UTC Aerospace Systems and you get a chance to explore and take a tour of the site, as well as to go onto the manufacturing floor to see how they put together IDGs, ESGs, things like that. So it's quite eye-opening for them as well. The teachers attend as well, so it's great for them to see how they can kind of connect with the students and bring some relevancy to what they're learning in the classrooms. Junior year will be the job shadow experience. So it'll be each experience, as you can see, kind of builds on the other. And so it'll be a smaller group of students that get a chance to actually shadow an employee in a career where they have a lot more opportunity to ask one-on-one. And then senior year, outlining some type of apprenticeship or internship for all of the students. So once again, it's for all students. So we have a lot of connections to make within the community. This is a community effort, right? We can't do it alone. The school systems can't do it alone. It has to be an engaged partnership, right? And so we're working on building that out now. So that's in the high school space. On the early childhood space, our 2 Healthy Starts teams have pilot programs going on now. One is focusing on the effects of parent and child engagement, how that helps to develop a child's brain early on. And so we have several play groups that are being piloted in various places to help increase that interaction, to help with the kindergarten readiness metric as well. And then we have another effort called our single point of entry card. What we realized within our area is that not only case managers for families were having a hard time navigating our social services, so getting access to services that they need, such as food, housing, things like that, daycare. And so they have a hard time navigating because there's so many different organizations. Who do I go to for the best quality? And so what we are piloting right now is our community partners have to step up to the plate to be the single point of entry for food for the entire community, the single point of entry for housing for the entire community. And that takes a lot of working together, putting your agenda at the door and understanding what is the greater good, right? What are you working towards? And that's to be able to provide these services for families. So those are some of the big initiatives that we're working on at the moment.
That's great. I want to turn now to a slightly different topic because I think this has been a really clear picture of the kinds of things that are happening in Rockford. So under ESSA, we know schools, the new rating system's being developed and schools are being assessed and performance data is going to be coming out. So under this new accountability system, when data comes out in the fall and the new report card's available, and some schools inevitably, maybe in Rockford, maybe not, will need to have supports provided because they're not performing. Nancy, can you just help us start to think about this? How do the practices of collective impact and what could be happening in a community inform what you might do in this new world under ESSA and really trying to provide supports to schools to succeed?
Well, first of all, I have to just say how incredibly impressed I am with what we've heard. And actually, who wouldn't want to be a superintendent in a community where this many people care about your success? This is a recruitment vehicle, you know? And even if you didn't know what was being developed, you certainly appreciate the support you have now in this broad community. Well, this might be sacrilegious, but I wouldn't let ESSA, ESSA, ESA be too much of a driver. It takes you back to this is only about the schools. It is not only about the schools, because if you look at birth rates and prenatal care and the misdiagnosis on many occasions that pediatricians give, or the lack of handoff between the pediatrician and the early childhood educators, and I could go on and on all the way through the pipeline, this is every component's issue. And ESSA, once again, returns the federal investment or interest to one cog, a big one, a huge one, where you live. But it helps other people not take responsibility. Do you see what I mean? So I think it's much more important to be clear what your goals are, to know what indicators you are measuring, and this merger or integration of social agencies, social work, healthcare, transportation, homelessness, this broadens the investment of the community. So what I mean is I probably wouldn't go to Washington and say this, and I do know that the state education department in Illinois and New York and Ohio has all this responsibility, but it's just not the only set of metrics. So it's not a negative, it's a positive. Make your own metrics, give your own report of what matters most to Rockford, and you know what? It'll probably meet the needs of ESSA. So you might not have expected that answer. And I do know that when I read what I was supposed to do, I was supposed to think about that. But I'm just pretty convinced it's too narrow.
That's great. Yeah. Do you want to comment just on how Alignment Rockford sees it, please?
Yeah, so all of these tools are just like diagnostic tools you would get when you go to the doctor. I mean, they might take an x-ray, they might take MRI, they might take a CAT scan or whatever, but to the doctor's point, all the systems of our body work together, and to the extent that the public school system has a strategic plan that they have already sort of crafted, and they know the metrics we need to move forward, that's what Alignment Rockford is going to focus on in terms of solution design, because we recognize that this whole thing is not just complicated, it's complex. Complicated is doing space shuttle stuff, which is what Anisha used to do. Complex is getting people to act right. That's what I had to do as a pastor. And so when you try to attack a complex problem as if it's just complicated, meaning just using these metrics or using this tool or whatever, you're not going to come out with the right solution. So we're going to take that information and put it in the portfolio of all the other metrics that we're looking at so that we can check to make sure that, you know, we're reading our metrics right. But ultimately, we have a strategic plan that we're going to pursue, and we have a goal of providing for movement and student achievement and health and happiness within our community that we're not going to get off of. That's been our success, I believe, is a focused determination to stay true to our mission and to not deviate regardless of whoever's in charge. You're our fourth superintendent, I believe, since we started Alignment Rockford. I'm the third pastor in 94 years at the church I pastor. So chances are I'm going to be here for a while, and so we're just going to stay the course.
Great. Dr. Jarrett, did you want to comment? No way. Not going to follow that. Anisha, did you want to comment just in this context? Great. So let me turn it back to Nancy, and then we'll see if anyone has any kind of final remarks. So what do you know now that you wish you knew then? What advice would you give for folks getting started in this work and in this context?
Well, I think it's just going to take a lot of iterations. And I would say, Dr. Copeland, you've seen those revolutions and iterations and not be afraid of it and not feel like it's going to fall apart. What happened to us is we started with 20 or 30 people, and before you know it, we were at 200. Now, 200 is great, but you can't make decisions with 200. So finally, you have to decide who are the decision makers in the community. It doesn't mean they all have to be grass tops. They can be grassroots or any other language you want to use to say a neighborhood developer is just as important as the mayor or the superintendent or whomever. But you know what, folks? We have to make some decisions here. We need leadership, and we need continuity, and it doesn't always come from one source. So when I left Cincinnati, there was a lot of, oh my God, what are we going to do? And unfortunately, they survived my departure. And they just went right into 2.0, and life goes on. So don't be fearless, just be disciplined. This is disciplined work. And that's why when people say, oh, we do that, I go, do you really do that? Because I think it's really hard, and it's a long road. So I can't say enough about how vivid the picture is that you've painted.
And obviously, we hope it's very exciting to all of you, and we think this has just been a great discussion of what can happen when the communities come together to focus on improving schools and the community as a whole. So thank our panelists and Dr. Zimpher for being here. So thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next year. And hopefully more leadership communities will be joining us as well. Thank you, and have a good evening.
You have to fill this room with data. Make them do a data walk.